to be recording the session. If you want to change your name so that your name doesn't appear as yourself, as long as it doesn't change into something that's offensive, that's absolutely okay. And if you want to ask a question when we get to that section, but you don't want to ask it directly, feel free to use the chat to message it directly to me, and I will make a note of it and I will ask it on your behalf without saying who the question has come from. I'll run through what we're going to do this evening, which is we're going to start with the panel that we've assembled, introducing themselves to you so you know who's here and who they are. I'll start with myself. My name is Melanie Earp. I'm from Trafford Green Party and my pronouns are she, her. Once we have introduced the panel to you, Emma Garnett is going to give you a presentation, which is going to be very interesting, based around her slide presentation she's delivered elsewhere to various Green Party groups. And then Jake Walsh is going to take over and he's going to talk you through the motion that we have going to Green Party conference in September. We're going to be ably assisted by Cade, who's going to be doing all of our tech work, for which I'm very grateful because I have no ability to do any tech whatsoever. And with that, I'm going to hand over. Let's start with you, Emma, to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name's Emma Garnett. I'm a researcher in sustainable consumption at the University of Cambridge and a member of Cambridge Green Party. And yeah, I'm interested in how we get a transport system which is incompatible with net zero and conserving biodiversity. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Phil.
Hello, my name is Phil Sturgeon. I'm with South Gloucestershire Green Party and my pronouns are he, him. Yeah, I work in reforestation, running a charity, and I'm interested in helping slash transportation emissions so that we don't just lose all of our woodlands to wildfires forever.
Okay, thank you, Jake.
I'm Jake Welsh. I'm from Manchester Green Party. My pronouns are he, him. I wrote the motion that's going to conference, with the help from other people. I've been interested in sort of transportation issues because I think transport poverty is like one of the biggest forms of poverty, and we don't discuss it enough. And that's kind of how I came around to being in favour of HS2. And I've been a member of Greens for HS2 for the last year or two, I think, since it was founded.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, hi, Steve Caldwell, Solihull Green Party, he, him. Yes, so I'm a councillor in Solihull. I sit on our planning committee and I've also been on the HS2 implementation advisory group for Solihull Council. Obviously, Solihull is the site of one of the first stations for HS2 at the interchange site in our borough. I was also the West Midlands mayoral candidate for the Green Party in 2021, and I made a transport system that works for everybody one of my 3 key pledges during that campaign. And HS2 is going to play an integral part in that, and the way in which it helps us to remodel and reshape transport throughout the country is what makes it so absolutely vital to be delivered in full. And yeah, I just think it's worth stating that when I first joined the party, I was quite vehemently anti-HS2. And it was through listening to people who I appreciated, understood more about the railway system than I did. That's how I sort of came to change my view on it.
Thank you, Steve. Adam?
Hi, everybody. Adam Turner here, pronouns are he, him. I am the chair of the North West Wales Green Party. I'm also a town planner. I've got an accreditation from the Royal Town Planning Institute and currently working at a local authority. I specialise in transport planning as well as urban design, so I'm quite interested in how this new railway can integrate into the current network. Being a green, I'm interested in seeing how we can make the greenest forms of transport the most accessible and cheapest, the easiest forms. So that's probably where my interests lie for this evening.
Thank you. And Pete, please.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm Pete Johnson from Lambeth Green Party. Pronouns are he, him. I've been in the rail industry, working mostly on the IT side, but doing everything from operations to revenue to infrastructure monitoring, all sorts of things. My interest is in getting the Green Party to have a transport policy that's properly coherent and that really leads to a decarbonisation of transport, which is the biggest emitter of CO2 that we have. Yeah, that's it. I think that's me.
Perfect, thank you. So that is our panel for this evening. And what I'm going to do now is hand over to Emma and let her take you through her presentation. Emma.
Thank you very much, Mel. Bear with me, everyone, while I set this up. Okay. Can you see the full slides and not the presentation mode? Thumbs up from Mel. Excellent. All right. Again, thank you very much for coming, everyone. So this presentation is a variant of one I've given a couple of times about kind of the green case for HS2. Many of the slides have kindly been provided by Gareth Dennis of Permanent Rail Engineering, which has saved me having to do them. So many thanks to Gareth. And also a lot of the content and ideas I've built on from work other Greens for HS2 members have done. So it takes a village to build a PowerPoint. And a particular shout out to Pete Johnson, who always knows which reports to go to for different numbers. All right, so Green Party policy on HS2, and I think it's not quite as straightforward as many of us might think. So the 2019 manifesto did talk about scrapping the doomed HS2 rail line, but in the policies for sustainable society, which is like the policy bedrock, TR 244, the Green Party supports the principle of a new north-south high-speed line, which would reduce the number of short-haul flights in the UK. I am speaking on my own behalf, not on behalf of Cambridge Greens or the Green Party. But basically, if you're an inclusive Green Party member who supports HS2, you are entitled to become a Greens for HS2 member. So do get in touch with us afterwards if that's something you might be interested in. And just because this accusation gets lobbed quite a lot on Twitter, Greens for HS2, we don't receive, any funding from any external sources at all. We're just trained nerds, basically. Slide going forward. And now a little bit about me, not because I matter personally in this context at all, but because I think a lot of my attributes are ones you'd associate with someone who was anti-HS2. So, I've loved nature for, as long as I can remember. There's a photo of me aged about 7 or 8 going on an RSPB, like Young Birders bird ringing trip, which was amazing. I got to hold a blue tit. It was great. I've been a Green Party member since 2015. I've been attending climate protests since 2007. Like that second photo is me speaking at an Extinction Rebellion scientists event last year about getting fossil fuel sponsorship dropped. I've got 2 degrees in ecology and biodiversity conservation. And my PhD and research fellowship are around kind of behavior change and moving towards more sustainable diets. So I'm not an urban planner or a railway engineer. I'm not a kind of train expert, but I think there are some quite important and interesting overlaps between diet and transport. So this is sort of the perspective I'm bringing, that they are individual choices which are really heavily influenced by our infrastructure, by our social context, and by availability, accessibility, price. They're both absolutely key sectors for climate change and biodiversity, as well as human well-being. And people need to eat and travel. These are things that we need, and all options have some sort of environmental impact. So what are the trade-offs, which are relatively better? And now, before we actually talk about HS2, I'm going to sort of run through some kind of starting parameters. I think some things which are fairly kind of uncontroversial, or things that most people in the Green Party would agree with. So firstly, is H2 Limited doing a good job? Is a really different question to, is a high-speed north-south rail a good idea for decarbonising transport? Secondly, electric rail has just one of the smallest carbon footprints of any transport mode. Cars and roads also take up much more land than rail. Point 4, electric cars, better than petrol, but not great. Point 5, we need so many different policies to decarbonise UK transport. We're not going to have any magical silver bullets. Point 6, length of rail track has really declined in the UK, which I think a lot of people might not appreciate. And point 7, high-speed 1 Eurostar had a lot of opposition before it was finished. So the first point, and this one does come up quite a lot, like climate solutions can be badly implemented. And so I think it's sort of separating out, yes, we agree with this, we want it, but we want it done better. It needs to get done better. And so, for example, there's a lot, really sadly, like too many examples of like corruption and child labor in mined metals and minerals for renewable energy storage and transport. Amnesty International have done various reports on this. And so that doesn't mean that we don't support solar panels. It means, no, we need sort of good and ethical working conditions, social justice, climate justice, not that, oh, therefore, scrap all solar panels. There are problems with how they're being made. And so you can, just everyone coming away from this, feel free to criticize HS2 Ltd and like how the project is, improvements you want to see, whilst kind of supporting HS2. Point number 2, and this was a graph took from Phil Sturgeon, so cheers Phil. Electric rail has just got a really small carbon footprint. So operational grams of CO2 per passenger per kilometre, sort of tailpipe emissions. And perhaps unsurprisingly, you've got large car, petrol up at the top, like domestic flight, long haul flight, like smaller cars, motorcycles, like electric vehicles, and sort of right down at the bottom, rail, electric rail, Eurostar, HS2. Unfortunately, in the UK, rail doesn't make up enough of our the journeys we're taking. So it's makes up 2% of trips and about 10% of distance. And you can see, how much cars are dominating how people are traveling. 61% of trips and about 3/4 of the distance. So even like with people driving less, and even with kind of less overall travel, that's still an awful lot of car trips that it would be great to shift over to more efficient methods. Here's one of the slides from Gareth. And so yes, we also need to electrify rail and kind of decarbonize rail, and that could save 3.6 million tons of CO2. But like a 10 percentage point shift, modal shift towards rail would save us almost 10 million tons of CO2. So having, yes, there's things we need to improve railways and make them greener, but also we need to get more people onto railways and out of cars. Cars take up a lot of land, like a lot of space. And this was this fantastic image, I think, from Australia, kind of space to transport of 69 people, one bus on the left, which is kind of the train equivalent here, 69 bikes or 60 cars based on average passenger numbers in cars. And it's just, so with cars, they're just using more energy and more land, so there's not even kind of that trade-off. Example 2, cars and roads take up an awful lot of land. So this is the M2 Medway Bridge in Kent, that lots of kind of sprawl of grey road. And then you can see on like the left-hand side, that sort of brownie ready like narrow track, that's HS1, that's the Eurostar. It has a slightly higher capacity than the M2 for a fraction of the width. Yeah, Pete did the calculations for that. And so like a double track railway is less wide than many A roads. They're incredibly land and space efficient. And I love this 1979 British Rail advert. There is an alternative to commuting by rail, but could we live with it? And the Big Ben just absolutely swamped by lanes and lanes and lanes of traffic and cars. And this is sort of like manifesting in too many parts of the world, but this is in Houston in Texas. In the US, so the freeways got expanded to 26 lanes at a cost of 2.8 billion, and travel times increased. And so unless we kind of get off our dependency on cars, like it sounds a bit overdramatic, but like this is the future we're heading towards. Like the amount of road buildings that are getting approved in the UK is quite staggering. Point 4, like electric vehicles, better than petrol, but not great. So they have some good points, like battery store renewable energy. So kind of excess, if you've got solar panels on your roof and you've got excess energy, you could charge a car, that's good. They do have very low CO2 emissions. They do have lower air pollution. These are all good things. We need some cars in our net zero transport future, absolutely. They do have a lot of drawbacks. So batteries are heavy to transport, so that makes them less efficient. And therefore, as you're kind of scaling, it's extremely difficult to electrify lorries and like really heavy vehicles, because the weight of the battery you need to power the thing means you're carrying kind of more weight from that battery. It's not great. You've got to kind of mine like lithium and cobalt for batteries. There's quite a simple map of where some of those sort of are. And so, there will be ancient forests disappearing under mines that we need for a renewable energy transition. You still get particulate matter like 2.5 from tire wear. So this is called like non-exhaust particulate matter. And so that's just from, the car tires rubbing on roads. And this is like the really nasty one that can get really kind of stuck in your lungs. So yes, you don't have the emissions from electric vehicles from the tailpipe, but they are still producing stuff. You've still got congestions, collisions, like cars are dangerous. And kind of rubber on tarmac, it's much less efficient than kind of steel on steel. Not so useful. And then of course you've also got the embodied emissions of, and all the resources going into kind of making cars. They take up a lot of resource. And as I mentioned previously, just high land use, inefficient use of space. So like have a quick think, like how many tons of CO2 do you think it takes to build an electric car? How many tons of CO2 do you reckon we get from UK road traffic in 1 month? And then how might that compare to HS2 construction emissions? So no one needs to kind of yell out, but just sort of have a think of what sort of scale you think those numbers are. And revealing the answers already. So a new Nissan Leaf electric vehicle, which is quite like a small to medium car. I think it's like below average size given the number of SUVs in the UK. That's about 10 tons of CO2 in embodied emissions to make it. And so in this graph here, you can see that an electric car has higher emissions to kind of build it than an average, petrol car. But then the emissions don't really kind of increase over its lifetime because it's electric. So that's good news. Whereas a non-electric car, the emissions, those grey bars that just keep on increasing year after year because of all the CO2 from the fuels. And 1 month of UK road emissions is about 9 million tons of CO2, like every single month from getting everyone around on road. And the HS2 build has sort of been estimated between 8 to 14 million tons CO2. Let's kind of go for a sort of a slightly worst case scenario. Let's call that 12. Let's call that 12 million tons of CO2. That would be like 1.2 million Nissan Leafs. So that's quite a lot of cars. But replacing the 32 million petrol and diesel cars and vans in the UK is equivalent to the construction emissions of 27 HS2s. That's quite a lot. And railways, of course, have much, much, much longer lifespan than cars. And so I think there's a bit of a kind of a view, oh, we don't need railways. We can just, everyone can switch to electric vehicles and that magically means there's sort of no emissions. And like, that's not true. Like there's a lot of energy and resource and CO2 that goes into making these things. Point number 5, multiple ambitious policies are needed to decarbonize transport. Transport's a little bit terrifying. It's our highest emitting sector by quite a margin now, and emissions aren't declining. So you can see in this graph here from 1990 to 2019. Good news, emissions from energy have really fallen as we've moved from coal to gas and sort of more renewables. But transport is just is not going anywhere, and it's overtaken. And many net zero reports are calling for less overall travel and increasing rail travel so that you can have both. So transport's now 27% of our greenhouse gas emissions, energy supplies now down to 21. Some long-term trends. So since 1949, just motor vehicle traffic has increased and increased and increased. Cars and taxis have gone up more than 2,000%. We need to sort of get off of roads. This is a big and growing problem. I think the other kind of points of opposition that we come across quite a lot in terms of HS2 is that, okay, post-pandemic, everyone is working from home, no one is traveling anymore. Has COVID meant travel has fallen? I mean, not really. So June 2022, rail ridership was back to 90% of pre-COVID levels. And that's despite them not running all the services and various, confusion. I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone here. Trains aren't running optimally brilliantly in the UK at the moment, and we're still at kind of 90% pre-COVID levels. This is a really interesting graph, road traffic. So this only goes from March 2020 but to January 2022, so this isn't sort of until the summer, but this was the only one I could find. And weekday traffic has declined a little bit pre-COVID, so it's about 90% of what it was, but actually weekend car road traffic is higher than it was pre-pandemic. So this idea that, we don't need any extra rail capacity because of COVID, I would argue does not stack up. And when we're thinking about kind of modal shift, short versus long car journeys, I think there's also a kind of a wish that, okay, all of our car dependency, if people just switch to walking and bike, we can just get rid of that. Wouldn't that be great? And I kind of partly agree, but I don't think that entirely solves our problem. So I think these are some really interesting graphs, again, shared by Pete. So most car trips are kind of less than 10 miles. This is this graph on the left, about 80%, up to 10 miles, and only 20% of car trips are 10 miles and above. And so it's a bit easier to get rid of those perhaps up to 10-mile car journeys. But if we're looking at kind of car miles, the trips, the journeys that are up to 10 miles are only 31% of car miles. And those not many trips that are going further are responsible for about 70% of car miles. And so this really matters from a pollution, from a kind of transport infrastructure, from an emissions point of view. It's not enough just to get rid of the short car journeys. We need to give people further options for sort of shifting away from longer car journeys. And yep, sure, short car journeys, switching to biking and walking, that makes lots of sense. Like medium car journeys, trams and buses. Long car journeys are definitely kind of, I think, just best replaced with trains on all sorts of metrics. I've done long coach journeys before. They're not great. They're not brilliantly fun. And I think also, some people are working more from home, and there's anecdotal evidence that people are relocating and taking like less frequent but longer journeys. Point 6. Hopefully everyone's with me so far. I realize it's rattling through an awful lot of information. Length of rail track has really, really declined in the UK. There is this brilliant graph from Mason 1998, length of rail in the UK from 1800 to sort of 1998. So in the dark blue line, you can see there's this big hump where we kind of maxed out a total length of railway route at around like 1920, 1940, and it really started crashing in the sort of 60s. And passenger kilometers underneath that, following a very, very similar pattern. And I think this is also a really key point. I really understand a lot of people feel, HS2, it's about, faster, kind of more kind of growth, just, more stuff like consumerism. And don't take that, like I'm a degrowther. But I just want like a length of railway line that, comparable to sort of 1900, like 1960s. And then going a little bit further from sort of 1955 across to 2020, again, we just have not much rail track compared to what we're used to. So many have got closed down. And also there's a lot more people in the UK. So in terms of like amount of rail track per person has sort of declined even more steeply. And you sort of think about, there've been loads of different schemes since I last gave this presentation, like Austria's €3 climate pass, like Germany's got a €9 one, and lots of, Spain making journeys free, like lots of really, really great schemes happening in other countries. And in the UK, imagine we did this. Imagine you could kind of travel in the UK for sort of €3 a day, and we properly price cars and parking, and say we also ban flights within mainland Britain. Like, we simply do not have the capacity to meet that demand. We are quite limited. But yes, like we really, really want trains to be cheaper, but then they will become even more overcrowded unless we increase capacity. Point number 7, sort of HS1 protests. There was this absolutely amazing quote I found on the Kent Online from 2020. So speaking to the Financial Times in 2012, one member of the pressure group, against the planned Channel Tunnel rail link route, said this of opponents to HS2. All the government has to do is bring some of them down to Kent and say, look, these people were up in arms over high-speed rail. Now no one bothers talking about the line. So HS2, so why was I anti, and then why did I change my mind? It is badly named. Like, it does sound like, is it just about 15 minutes faster trains to Birmingham? No, it's about increasing rail network capacity. Point 2, like, wouldn't it be better to improve existing infrastructure already? And in fact, no, that would be more damaging and disruptive, and building HS2 does improve existing rail infrastructure for reasons I'll explain. Point 3, lots and lots of ancient woodland loss. Like, yes, there is some ancient woodland loss, and that's sort of really nasty and regrettable. Road building and climate change pose a greater threat. Is the cancellation of the eastern leg, which was Birmingham to Leeds, was that a good idea? Absolutely not. And if the eastern leg doesn't get built, HS2 only frees up capacity on one rail line instead of 3. So here is what some of the rail tracks in the UK are looking like. So in this graph on the this map, sorry, on the left-hand side, you can see there's 3 lines running kind of north to south to London and up to Scotland. And there's the East Coast Main Line in blue, and then the Midland Main Line in green, and the West Coast Main Line in black going up there. And then in this map figure on the right hand side, we've got the kind of initial proposal for what HS2 should look like. And it's this sort of Y shape. So kind of London to Birmingham, and then branches off Birmingham to Manchester, Birmingham to Leeds. And so it's 330 miles in total. And phase 1 is London to Birmingham. That's very kind of far underway. Phase 2A is Birmingham to Crewe. And then phase 2B, there's the western bit and the eastern bit. So just if you're hearing about these different phase 1, phase 2s, that's what that means. So HS2 and what that does for rail capacity. So moving on to some more of Gareth's excellent slides. UK rail network has a mixed traffic problem. We've got a whole lot of different trains with different speeds, different performance characteristics on the same tracks competing for space. And the long distance, high speed services have the most adverse impact on capacity. And you think about it with roads and cars, we segregate, we don't have one type of road. We've got motorways, we have A roads, we have B roads. You don't have cars going at 30 miles an hour and 70 miles an hour on the same road. It would just be absolute carnage. But this is sort of the situation we've got with trains at the moment. And so this is how this adversely impacts capacity. So imagine you've got a long distance high speed train in red that sort of sets off at 0 minutes past the hour and is going very, very fast. And then shortly after that, you've got a local stopping train, serving local communities, so people have got options sort of to commute, heading off, going at a slower pace, and it has to sort of set off to get far enough ahead, and before you can then have another fast train in red coming along kind of behind it, competing for space. And there's quite a few people, I think, from Cambridge in the on the call, and just if you're traveling from Cambridge to London or or anywhere in the UK, and you're on sort of a slower stopping service, you can start noticing you end up getting really kind of deprioritized. You sort of end up stopping randomly, or end up in a sort of strange siding, so that those faster trains can sort of overtake and come past you. So it's really, really inefficient, this sort of current setup. Whereas if you have sort of single service types running on the same tracks, you can really maximize capacity. So you've got all the high speed services, the sort of big intercity ones, London to Glasgow, all around the country, then they can kind of bunch up together and you can run a whole lot kind of more trains on the same tracks. And similarly, kind of if you've got the slower trains, if they're not competing with the faster ones, you can bunch them up together and run many, many more services. And this was a real kind of light bulb moment for me when this was sort of explained to me, that I thought HS2 was kind of just additional capacity, but it's not just additional capacity, it's sort of multiples of that, because it makes sort of the rest of the so many other parts of the rail network run more efficiently, which I think is really, really exciting. And so what HS2 does, it moves those fast intercity services off the West Coast main line, the Midlands main line, and the East Coast main line. It gets them on their own tracks, and it means those three, West Coast main line, Midlands main line, East Coast main line, can run more slower services, because all the trains that go from London to York without stopping can now just be on sort of separate tracks. And so it frees up capacity on 3 main lines. So kind of one of the sort of sound bites, essentially, it's 3 rail lines kind of for the price of 1.5, I guess it is a Y shape. But that is kind of why it's really exciting. And we need more high-speed rail in the UK. So German Green Vice President, and so Vice President of the European Green, sort of Terry Reintke, came to the UK, and she sort of tweeted this, which I thought was excellent. She was traveling kind of from Edinburgh, then a rather long train journey to Bristol. More high-speed connections between North and South in the UK might be worth thinking about. I completely agree. German Greens think we need more high-speed rail. And as you might have kind of come across, the government cancelled the eastern leg. And if it stays cancelled, this is really, really bad news, because you need that eastern leg to free up capacity on the Midlands main line and the East Coast main line. So you can see here sort of in red, running from sort of Birmingham up to Leeds and York. They are then relieving the services, the ones that would go from London to Sheffield, London to Leeds and York. And without that eastern leg, HS2 essentially just becomes a West Midlands mainland bypass. You're increasing capacity on 1 main line instead of 3. So it's still useful, but you've massively, massively slashed the benefits for still, a similar level as of the cost. It's a really, really, really bad idea. Kind of onto sort of ancient woodland. So look, any ancient woodland, any valuable ecosystem loss is horrible. And I don't want to kind of minimize that at all. So the definition of ancient woodland in the UK is woodland that's persisted since 1600 in England and Wales, or 1750 in Scotland. And that's 52,000 sites in England. And I kind of assumed that ancient woodland had like lots of many old trees, but it doesn't necessarily. So it's land that's sort of been forest that hasn't been turned into farmland or kind of or urban land. But it can have been clear felled essentially. So I forget its name, but the second largest ancient woodland in Cambridgeshire, I went to see it this spring for bluebells. One of the signs, it says, except for a few trees, like the entire wood got clear felled during World War II. So I'm in this ancient woodland and most of the trees are like 80 years or younger, with a few exceptions. So the really kind of special stuff is kind of, the soil hasn't been plowed up, hasn't been kind of tarmacked over. But they're not quite as sort of, entirely ancient as one might think, from that description. A lot of quotes saying, 108 ancient woodlands are getting destroyed. Like, no, happily, this is not happening. HS2 is not doing that. The Wildlife Trust report listed all the woodlands within a 1 kilometre strip of sort of the proposed route so that was, an absolutely worst case scenario. If the railway line were kind of 1 kilometre wide, that would have happened, but that's not happening. And so far, so this is phase 1, 2A and 2B, the western leg. There's 54 woodland sites directly impacted. There's 40 hectares lost over that's a bit more than 155 miles. And most sites are losing less than 1 hectare. And so our ancient woodland loss to HS2, yes, it absolutely needs to be kind of minimized. And I think we should be sort of, campaigning for that and making sure, best practice. It's 0.01% or kind of 1/10,000th. So I think that's a lot less than many people might think. And look, I'm an ecologist. I know like you want to avoid loss, and restoration sort of is the sort of next step. So I know it's kind of not, a perfect, but this is a good thing. So HS2 is planning to plant an additional 440 hectares, and they're restoring 245. And there's also ancient woodland soils that are being kind of translocated, because again, kind of the soil is really, really the key part almost of ancient woodlands. Again, not perfect, but it's good that mitigation is happening. I really recommend it. If you're on Twitter, follow Penny McGregor. Her family owns part of Covington Wood. I think about 2 hectares of that are being lost to HS2, and she's been documenting the restoration process on Twitter. And she's changed her mind about the railway line from anti to kind of to broadly supportive. A look around Covington HS2 mitigation sites, we see challenges and successes, a normal part of growing stuff. Yes, definitely follow Penn. And thinking about kind of ancient woodlands, so here's a map of kind of part of the Chilterns. Look at these sort of bits in green, and the bits in purple are kind of SSIs. It's just scattered about like confetti. We've got, the reason there's 52,000 sites is because it's so fragmented. We've got all these tiny parts. Look at that, how could you make a route that entirely avoided everything, let alone kind of people's homes or kind of other kind of important sites, for nature other than ancient woodland, is quite difficult to avoid. HS2 is going through kind of a tunnel, and that is avoiding quite a lot of the woodland, so this is kind of good news. But it's just, we've got all these tiny patches that aren't particularly robust ecosystems when they're so small. And so this is an interesting quote from the House of Lords Committee. All ancient woodland is irreplaceable, but the loss of less than 1 hectare out of about 11,000 in the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty is, we consider, a remarkable achievement. So this is from 2017. And putting up a parking lot, and again, thanks to Pete for crunching these numbers, but like the total area of ancient woodland affected by HS2, is less than Heathrow's car parking spaces. So Heathrow's car parking spaces are about 59 hectares, and woodland affected from most of HS2 is about 40. And the total area of land used by HS2 is approximately the same as Heathrow Airport, and that's about 12 kilometers squared. So for me personally, like felling 40 hectares of ancient woodland for a car park, golf course, roads, that is unjustifiable. That is a line in the sand for me. But like at some point, benefits outweigh costs. Whether we're going for electric vehicles or electric trains, we're going to be losing ancient woodland, in the UK or in other countries who are mining the minerals, for our cars. Net zero infrastructure does have ecological impacts. There's no way around this. It's about sort of weighing up kind of pros and cons. And maybe for some people, like any UK ancient woodland loss, is entirely unacceptable and they don't want that to happen. And that's a sort of a value judgment that exists and that I can't sort of necessarily argue with. But I think we also have to kind of see the bigger picture. And for me, building electric railways in the UK kind of encapsulates the Green Party ideology of think global, act local. I really think kind of rail is part of that. And this is sort of stating the obvious, but climate change threatens ancient woodland as well. We already sort of seen fires across England, like from the terrifying heat wave this summer. This example, this happened last year. This really upset me. So in Greece, there was like this 2,500-year-old olive tree, like burned down in the Greece wildfires, summer 2021. That tree had survived so much, and climate change sort of brought it down. And I'm not saying every project that sort of claims to sort of help us get to net zero is sort of automatically approved or automatically a good thing, but we got to keep sort of our eye on the bigger picture, in my opinion. And also, Greens love trains. We love trains. So German Green Party, they proposed a kind of a night train route. There was this hypothetical map, and sort of Green Twitter went, wow, they're like, yes, this is great. This is sort of really, really exciting. And a few people pointed out, why do the Green Party of England and Wales like oppose more rail, like oppose HS2? And because everyone loves a good meme, or at least I do, there's one of this dog I really like saying, please throw, like throw the ball, like no take, only throw. And got to kind of a point of saying, yes, we want more trains, but like no railways, like only trains, which isn't quite going to work. And almost finally, that's a small lie, but even if you go away and you think HS2 is a bad thing, like it's already being built. We're currently at the environmental cost but no environmental benefit stage. And unlike closing a coal mine, which ongoing environmental damage from burning coal, it makes absolutely no sense to close down a new functioning electric railway. That would be madness. So at what point do environmental activists stop opposing HS2? So RIS2, not enough people have heard of. This is the road investment strategy. It's sort of at earlier stages. There's 4,000 miles of new roads. And I think there's not enough coordinated opposition from environmental groups. So there was a scrap RIS2 petition for Parliament, and it got about 1,800 signatures versus 155,000 for scrap HS2, and the deadline for the RIS2 one has passed. So a 300 miles, so a few hundred miles of electric railway line, 155,000 signatures opposing it, and 4,000 miles of roads, like a fraction of that, like 1/80th. And so if we are more successfully opposing railway lines than roads, we're going to end up with more roads, and that is bad news for nature, bad news for climate change, collisions, air pollution, the whole lot. So I'm in Cambridge Greens. There's quite a lot of local opposition, some local support for the East-West railway line, which I cannot wait to get built. I'm really hoping it goes ahead. And the Tories are just ploughing ahead with road building and just cancelling rail schemes. So Grant Shapps has signed off on a new Bedford to Cambridge Express road whilst pouring scorn on the parallel East-West rail scheme. The optics will look dreadful, but he doesn't care. And just look at some of the sort of RIS2 kind of documents of all of just so much tarmac, so much land getting taken up for sort of pretty minimal road capacity. And like we do not want to go down this path. And now this presentation has sort of mostly focused on HS2, but I want to discuss Northern Powerhouse Rail because this pertains to Jake's motion. So Northern Powerhouse Rail, or HS3, would be kind of a new line getting built from Liverpool to Leeds. It also partly relies on kind of the HS2 existing HS2 getting built and sort of the eastern leg as well. So things kind of run all the way kind of from Leeds to York. And so you can see here kind of in red that Northern Powerhouse Rail, HS2 in blue, lines that are being upgraded in purple, and existing main lines in grey. And the government has also completely kind of watered this down and sort of scrapping an awful lot of it. And so there's this great interactive graphic, again, thank you, Gareth, sort of rail portrayal. So you can see sort of what has been proposed and what has been slashed. And the Conservatives are just absolutely wrecking public transport plans for the Northeast. Like, it's absolutely shameful in terms of investment needed across the country, in terms of climate change, in terms of people having access to transport. I think rail needs like a loud green voice supporting it, standing up for it, because the Conservatives have no interest. They're very kind of pro-private car. So one set of conclusions, and then moving on just to the motion, and then Jake will talk. So transport, UK's highest emitting sector. We need a whole suite of ambitious policies, excuse me, to decarbonise transport. Rail's got lower land and climate footprints compared to road, and mixed speeds on railway lines just means that those fast intercity services that we still want, you know, we don't want to be getting a slow stopping service from London to Edinburgh or getting a domestic flight. They just eat up capacity. HS2, if it's built in full, moves the fastest trains from 3 main lines onto their own dedicated tracks, and that increases capacity on other lines. So we need to minimise natural habitat loss in the UK. We do, but we've got to also prioritise habitat restoration in the UK. There are so many kind of easier wins for restoring nature in the UK than opposing electric rail. And thank you very much for coming along and listening, everyone. And I will now pass over to Jake.
Thank you, Emma. That was absolutely brilliant. Jake, would you like to outline the motion that's going to conference for us, please?
Yeah, so just a bit of history about where this motion came from. So, you know, some of us have been active in a group called Greens for HS2 for quite a while now, and we've been doing various things to kind of change people's minds and perspectives on HS2. So we've been doing things at conference, and we've been doing, like, you know, we had a reverse hustings at last year's leadership election, and we've kind of been slowly trying to build a bit more support for HS2 before thinking that we should have a motion come to conference, because there is a fierce opposition to HS2 from a large section in the party. But it was last year when the government announced that the eastern leg to Leeds was going to get scrapped. It was going to get curtailed all the way to the East Midlands hub. And then shortly after that, the most likely outcome is that Manchester Piccadilly, they're not going to get any underground tracks at the station, you know, which was going to be like a through station, so that the Northern Powerhouse rail could then use it to go from Liverpool to Leeds via Manchester Piccadilly. And I was just really frustrated that the Green Party was saying nothing on this, because, you know, East Midlands and, you know, Yorkshire are two of the regions that have the biggest sort of like sort of lack of funding for public transport. You know, Leeds is the largest city in Europe without a metro station, and they're going to lose, you know, an improvement to their rail link. So I decided to just make this motion, because I thought, well, we really need to be saying something about this, because it's really important. So I just I'll read out the motion. So the synopsis says the motion calls for HS2 to be fully and to be funded and completed in full, including the entire eastern leg and an underground through station at Manchester Piccadilly. This motion also calls for the full potential of HS2 to be by fully sorry, I'm just trying to reread this. This motion also calls for the full potential of HS2 to be realised by fully building the Northern Powerhouse rail, which will use HS2 infrastructure. So the motion says, in the record of policy statements, which we call ROPS, delete the sections high-speed rail and stop HS2. Those are the sections of ROPS that mention HS2 and opposition to HS2 and high-speed rail. And then add into ROPS, the Green Party recognises that the first phase of HS2 between London and Birmingham is well under construction. Construction is not yet started on phase 2A, and Parliament has not fully approved the funding for phase 2B of HS2. So phase 2B is the route to Manchester and the route to originally route to Leeds. If HS2 is not built in full, Manchester and Leeds will not achieve its maximum capacity release on the rail network. It will limit the environmental gains and could potentially widen regional inequality. Green Party calls for the government to fully fund and build HS2, including the entire eastern leg to Leeds, an underground through station at Manchester Piccadilly, the Goulburn link, or a better replacement. So the Goulburn link is somewhere between Crewe and Manchester. I can't forget quite where it is, up to Wigan, I think it is. It's a route that was originally planned to make HS2 easily connect to the rest of the West Coast main line up to Scotland via Cumbria and Lancashire, and that's been announced recently that that's probably going to get scrapped as well. So the Goulburn link, or a better replacement, which enables HS2 services to be easily used on parts of the existing West Coast main line to Lancashire, Cumbria and Scotland, as well as the original planned bicycle routes along parts of the HS2 line. The Green Party calls for the impact to be improved further by fully funding and building the Northern Powerhouse Rail, which includes a high-speed rail line from Liverpool to Manchester and onwards to Bradford and Leeds. This will use HS2 infrastructure in Manchester, including potentially sharing the underground HS2 station at Manchester Piccadilly. The Green Party calls for HS2 services to be extended to Liverpool using Northern Powerhouse rail infrastructure around Liverpool. The Green Party recognises the need to shift transport mode share away from cars and flights in order to tackle emissions from transportation, and that electric high-speed rail lines such as HS2 Northern Powerhouse Rail can play an important role in achieving this. High-speed rail lines free up capacity on other rail lines that serve regional and local rail services, allowing for more frequent trains to run on these lines. High-speed rail lines themselves reduce domestic flights and car journeys and long distance travel because they can better compete for shorter times. So yeah, so that's basically, you know, the Green Party it's a policy basically to say the Green Party needs to be behind having HS2 implemented in full, because at the moment we're only getting partly the impact of HS2, and it's already being built. So if we wanted to have a policy on what it was like before HS2 was even been built, fine, that's one thing that we could debate, but it's in the middle of being built all the way to Birmingham, and if it's not built all the way up to Leeds and Manchester, then this is going to severely have all these sort of concerns that people have about the environmental impact, as you know, that we've discussed about, but then it's not going to have the capacity release on all the rail lines across the country that we so desperately need. Yeah. I'll hand back to Mel.
Hi, sorry, I was just dealing with some questions. Apologies for keeping you waiting. Thank you for that, both of you. So as I said at the start, what we're going to do is open up the floor for questions and open that up to the panel to answer. And I know I have been contacted by Ellie Crane, that you said you have a question regarding comms around the policy. Can we go to Ellie, please? Cade, Ellie can't unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Lovely, thank you. Yes, I do support this motion, first thing to say. I've seen some of the strong feeling against HS2, for example, on Twitter. My concern is if conference does support this motion, have we got some sort of comms plan in place so we can take control of the messaging so that the wider world doesn't see it as the Green Party sort of U-turning and not understand the reasons behind this decision? Did that make sense? That was slightly incoherent, sorry.
No, that's perfect.
Thank you.
Steve, as an elected councillor, would you like to possibly take that to start?
Okay. So I'm an elected councillor on a borough council, but I don't have a position within the Green Party. However, I think it would be the role potentially of the transport spokesperson to handle that communications requirement from a communicating policy perspective. That is, after all, what we elect them to do as members. Sorry, no, we don't elect them, but they get appointed by somebody who we've elected to handle that role. So my expectation would be that, I think that's Matt Edwards, isn't it? So Matt Edwards would have to work with whomever it is that's won the external comms role in this year's GPEX elections to make sure that gets done in the right way. I don't think it's necessary for the proposer of the motion to have to worry about that, if I'm honest.
Okay, fantastic. Adam, I see that you've got your hand up as a panel member. Okay, could we go to Adam?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Just want to reassure Ellie, as one of the Greens for HS2, that Matt has actually reached out to us. Clearly, there's quite a significant minority at the moment. I think it's fair to say, of members who support HS2, significant enough actually that we have won support for our motions in workshops at Green Party Conference, for example. So the party's fairly split on this. So I think it's fair to say that the spokesperson is putting some strategies in place about our messaging on this. I think it's also fair to say that the messaging when the Eastern leg was cancelled was not brilliant. Adrian Ramsey was cornered on television about the Green Party's response to this rail investment being ripped out of the north, and of course, party policy, depending on how you interpret it, would support it. And I think Adrian found that difficult to say. So I think that was quite a learning experience for the leadership. It's interesting that Calla and Adrian actually wanted this motion prioritised, because I think they're aware that the comms at the minute is a bit muddled. So I just want to reassure people that we are talking to the leadership and the relevant spokesperson, and they are taking these concerns on board. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I don't see any of the other panel members saying they want to come in on this one, so I have an anonymous question, please. It is often said that if we oppose HS2, we'll get more roads. The question asker lives in Staffordshire, a few miles on the HS2 route, and a few miles in the other direction from the M54 M6 link road. The former hasn't stopped the latter from going ahead. And it's not like the government has said that we don't need all these new roads now that HS2 is being built. Are you as a panel optimistic that when High-Speed 2, being built will help achieve modal shift and cause a rethink of road building plans? Steve, would you like to come in?
Well, thank you. Am I optimistic that a Conservative or a Labour government is going to do the right thing when it comes to putting the policies in place to enable modal shift? I have to be optimistic. Whether or not they actually will or not is obviously more in their gift than it is in ours. However, I think there's a really important point here, which is that building railways takes a really long time. Changing policy can happen like that. We have elections regularly. Obviously, it's the point of the Green Party to be the political wing of the Green movement and to apply political pressure and hopefully to win more and more seats and to, in due course, get more and more MPs. And maybe one day we'll get to the point where actually we can have a meaningful impact on transport strategy in this country. But you can't have that strategy in a meaningfully deliverable state without having the infrastructure there to deliver it onto. And what we've seen from HS2 and HS1 before it is that actually it takes a really long time to build grand infrastructure projects. So we can't speak for what the people who are likely to be in charge are likely to do with it, but that's not a reason not to build it. That's a reason for us to continue campaigning for the right policies to take advantage of it.
Thank you. Pete, you seem like a sensible person to come in on this question as well. Do you need me to repeat it for you?
No, thanks. I got the question, Mel. No, I mean, I think I would actually just kind of echo what Steve has said. Road building is done by government as a matter of its road building policy. It can also build or not build railways. What HS2 does, and in fact what any rail expansion does, and you know, and as we've heard, I mean, building HS2 actually enables an awful lot more rail expansion than just HS2 itself, because of what you can then do on the existing network. But what that does is enable the modal shift that we're talking about. It doesn't make it happen. What makes it happen is good transport policy. So it's fares policy, it's charging people correctly for the use of the roads. It's recognizing at government level that building more roads is going in completely the wrong direction in terms of sustainability and CO2. And land use and community severance and all the other things that Emma picked up. So, you know, it's a kind of a necessary condition for that kind of modal shift, but it's not sufficient. We need policy as well.
No, perfect. Thank you. Are any of the other panel going to wave at me that they want to come in on this one? If not, I have another question from someone who's had to leave us. No. So what I'm going to go, I'll keep it anonymous because I haven't been told. I can definitely use this individual's name. So they ask, as a follow-up to the first question, as well as considering the potential comms on HS2, they would welcome stronger and clearer messaging on RIS2, potentially with a clear motion inviting conference to condemn the scheme and highlighting the stark choice in green policy messaging. Phil, this seems entirely a question that's aimed, you know, got your name on it for an answer. Can I come to you, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two go hand in hand. Just, you know, speaking to that last question, we need to have a coherent transport policy that's saying, you know, electric rail, electric trains good, road building bad. Trying to get anyone on board. I mean, I run the Stop RIS2 Twitter account, and I've been trying in my you know, with what little time I have available when I'm not trying to restore ancient woodlands. I'm trying to run the Stop RIS2 campaign, and it's been really difficult to get people on board. A lot of people are really ready to kind of complain about the electric trains, but you saw from the petition, hardly any numbers there. So having the Green Party kind of saying very clearly, we need to stop RIS2, we need to pause and review all road building, we need to, you know, do what Wales has done and say, hey, let's just, you know, put a pin in this for now. Let's figure out if we actually need to keep building all these roads. And I think that's something the Green Party, you know, can help support. Yeah.
No, fantastic. And I've noticed that Adam has put a link to your to Stop RIS2 link in the general chat for people who want to pick that up. Do any of the other panel want to come in on that? If not, I have another question to move on to. No, I'm not seeing hands. So this is, to me, a really interesting one. Now that High Speed 2 is being built, are any of the panel involved in holding High Speed 2 Limited to account and attempting to ensure it is the best that it can be in terms of reducing ecological damage? Steve, you seem like the immediate place to start on this one, but I'm happy to then take anyone else from the panel.
Yeah. So I think there is absolutely a role for electric greens in doing this. I think we have to understand what we can and can't do at the local government level. So the enabling bill for High Speed 2 to be built was an act of parliament, and there isn't really a lot that local councils can do about acts of parliament because it's beyond our pay grade. It's not something that the English legislative system allows us to contradict. So we can't tell HS2 Limited that they're not building their track here because they've already been able to purchase that land and that's already been approved by our MPs and the government. What we can do, and as I mentioned in my introduction, this is something that I've been doing in Solihull, is we can have an impact on some planning applications. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but there are two types of planning applications that HS2 Limited still has to bring to local authorities. And they're to do with things like how they access the land that they bought and how they're allowed to move goods vehicles onto those compounds and off of them, and the volume of movements. And that's still something for local authorities to legislate on, because it affects the villages that surround the building sites. And I've had HS2, well, not I personally, but I have argued quite vociferously for HS2 Limited applications to get thrown out of planning committee in Solihull, and I'd like to think that I have, because they have been refused in the past on the basis of the damage that they would do to local communities and local villages. And those refusals have then been referred to the planning inspectorate in Bristol, where they've been upheld. So it is possible to actually have a meaningful impact on the way that HS2 Limited goes about its business. And similarly, HS2 Limited, sorry, I'm getting invaded by a cat who's very needy. HS2 Limited are also obliged to work with local councils to inform us and to consult with us on the way in which they communicate their progress and the way in which they communicate with residents, to advise them of what's going on and when and how and what it means. And without being held to account by locally elected members, and this is not something that's unique to HS2 Limited, this is just how companies work in general, the customer service would be dreadful without people like me and elsewhere actually taking the opportunity to hold executives of HS2 Limited to account and say, no, you can't just go off and do stuff. You have to let parish councils know so that they can then cascade that to residents and so on and so forth. So there are things that we can do, but equally there are things that we really can't do because it's not within the gift of local authorities to do that. Yes, thank you, Kat.
Oh, bless. Phil, I think you'd be an excellent person to come in on this, please, if you could. And then Pete, did you have your hand up? Can you go after Phil, please?
Yeah, when it comes to ecological impacts, HS2 Limited definitely need, feedback and control on what they're up to. So there's been, just like Emma pointed out at the start, there's the idea of HS2 being good or bad is very separate from is HS2 Limited doing their job well. And there have been fantastic things that have happened. They have managed to shave the direct loss of ancient woodland down. I think we've saved 5 hectares, and very early involvement by the Woodland Trust reduced the number by 14 hectares as well. So people getting involved with it and trying to improve it can have, huge benefits. I think a huge chunk of that 5 hectares came from people campaigning for an extra tunnel under Long Itchington Wood, so that woodland hasn't been impacted at all. So yeah, the complaints about not enough bat boxes, now they're putting up bat boxes, complaints about plastic guards being used, even though that was the industry standard and alternatives didn't really exist until 2020. People complaining about those plastic guards mean that they're now using more and more cardboard guards and biodegradable bioplastic sapling guards, and I've seen loads of hemp mulch mats all over the place. So they are listening to feedback. We just have to keep making constructive feedback and making sure it's being done instead of just saying no, we don't want it. Fantastic.
Pete, did you have a reply to this question?
Yes, I'm going to echo what Phil has just said. I mean, there's the bit that's gone through Parliament and is agreed is the bill that says you can go and build a railway. There's plenty still up for grabs, whether it's about ecological damage, which is exactly what the question was asked about. It's definitely worth local representatives putting pressure on HS2 locally to do things the right way and to kind of make sure they fully understand the concerns of local people and the particulars of the local ecology, the local terrain, local environment, which of course tend not to be appreciated when people are drawing maps and designing things from an office somewhere. And it does work. I mean, we've seen, you know, as Phil has said, I mean, you know, the engagement with them on a local level does have improvements. It does mean that paths are realigned, the hedges are not cut down, that things are done in the right order, that trucks are kept off the road. You know, all of this stuff works. Just very quickly, another thing, of course, I mean, and we're going to do a politician's thing and answer a question that wasn't asked. Engagement with HS2, there's plenty of other ways in which we can engage. Things which are really not yet agreed are, for example, the way the trains are set up. We haven't yet agreed, for example, how many bike spaces there are to be on a train, whether there's kind of what the accessibility requirements are going to be, what the access to stations is going to be. This is one of the things that particularly, for example, our colleagues in Solihull, Steve and his colleagues, have been engaging with HS2 on, you know, getting rid of a whole lot of car parking spaces and making sure there's decent bike and public transport access to this enormous station at interchange. Making sure that local authorities make good local use of this released capacity that we've been talking about. You know, suddenly they can run more trains, and you know, we want to make sure that, you know, local Greens can make sure that they run the right trains, that they're the proper ones that that local people need. So, you know, plenty to play for. Our contention as Greens for HS2 is that you can do that much more strongly from a position of actually supporting the idea of the railway being built, rather than just saying, you know, no, we don't want it, and by the way, we don't want it, but we're going to complain about it by the way you're doing it anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of add that extra layer in.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. I wasn't going to be the person who couldn't find it. Right, I've got a question in the chat, but I've also seen that Leon Maurice Jones, you've got your hand up. Would you like to, I've asked you to unmute, hopefully. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of good stuff coming out of this, and, you know, it seems to me like a very good plan that we're moving, putting a separate rail down which allows local trains, but we're not actually adding any stations that are local. And I think that in a way this this whole topic has been a distraction from what really would be useful, which is to reopen a whole load of the closed lines. So as for instance, Marlborough, which is a large local town, has no train station, leaving the thousands of people that live there to have to get on a bus or drive. And for the same investment, we could actually have connected up thousands possibly of small villages and towns, which will be completely ignored, still leaving people having to drive. So I suppose my point rather than question is that that would have been a much better use of resources than to shave off a little bit of time by putting a parallel system down where we already have routes. We need to connect people that don't have rail, not people that already do. That's my point.
No, thank you, Leon. And you know, that was exactly why I started off opposed to high speed too. But I shall remain neutral as chair, and I shall hand over to Adam, who had his hand up, and then I will go to Emma and then Jake, who have an answer to this.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. I completely agree, actually. I live in North Wales, and we've basically got one decent railway line along the coast. So I'd like to see more railway lines opened up here, and I'm sure it's the same for people in Manchester, Birmingham, etc. And, you know, on the face of it, I could see why, if you lived in Birmingham, you might think, well, why on earth are we getting this railway line to London? Now, what that railway line does, of course, is it'll have its own designated station in Birmingham, in Curzon Street. And when all those trains which are going on that London, Birmingham, Manchester route are no longer clogging up New Street, you could then theoretically open up some new lines that arrive at New Street. At the minute, that's not possible. The trains that are coming into New Street are full of passengers, and the platforms when they get to New Street are full of trains. So that's why I like to call HS2 a local transport revolution. In Wales, where I am, there's often a discussion which goes along the lines of, well, HS2 isn't going to benefit us, but actually on the North Wales coast, it will. I mean, I regularly go to see family in Yorkshire, Manchester and Warwickshire, and I expect to benefit from more regular services from here in Colwyn Bay, simply because Manchester Piccadilly will be freed up, and because Birmingham New Street will be freed up. It's those real bottlenecks, like the Castlefield corridor in Manchester. Sorry if I'm getting a bit technical, which are really preventing these additional services and even additional lines from places as far afield as Cambridge, where Emma is, to Aberystwyth here in Wales. And that's because the railway is run on that kind of hub and spoke spinal shape. And if we actually sort out some of those hubs and spokes, build some new stations like Curzon Street, then we can talk about getting even more of those spokes to link up those communities which currently don't have rail. I think as a Green Party, we should be looking to emulate what the Scottish Greens have done and say that every town over a population of 5,000 should have a connection to rail. If you wanted my honest opinion as a town planner, and I've got expertise in transport planning, I don't think that'd be possible without HS2. So that's why I, like many others here, have gone from being fairly agnostic about it to pretty firmly pro, because I want to see the vision that you have, Leon, for the rail network. Thank you. Fantastic.
Can I go to you, Emma, please?
Yes, thank you very much for that question, Leon. A really important one. I think you said Marlborough, and if I heard that correctly, like, I grew up very, very near Marlborough in North Wiltshire, and it is very distressing to look at the OS map and just see all of the disused railway lines that have closed down. And in fact, there's now A roads running to Marlborough, going through Snack Forest, like a really beautiful piece of ancient woodland. I suppose you're echoing Adam's points that we need to get rid of these bottlenecks to be able to kind of run local services. And I think also it is really kind of tempting to see rail in a bit of a zero-sum game, like, oh, if London gets cross-rail, then the North can't kind of have anything else. And I think Tories tend to do divide and conquer quite a lot, and they can kind of stir that rhetoric. And on the one hand, yes, we have, kind of constraints with, how many people do we have who can kind of build railway lines. But one of the points Gareth Dennis makes quite often is that this government has a really bad long-term investment in rail strategy, because it keeps pulling the plug on projects. It doesn't have that pipeline, which means we don't have enough of a workforce able to do this. So I think kind of by supporting rail, yes, like, we want more rail, we are going to kind of see these projects through. We're not just going to kind of cut half of them off halfway through. We can then have a better kind of workforce able to deliver this, and so we can have everything. And because we can't see rail, we want a well-functioning network for rail to sort of to be useful and to be accessible to everyone. And that means we need it built wherever it's needed, not, oh, we'll put it here instead of there. Because if you've got a great railway network in the southeast but not the northwest, then that doesn't that's not kind of benefits across the UK. So I think we need to try not to see it as a serious game. And I think really make an argument, like, we want all of the electric rail kind of in all its different forms. But yeah, important question, and bring back Marlborough Station.
Yes. Jake, I'm going to come to you. Steve, I've seen you've got your hand up, but I'm not going to come to you on this one, just because we've got another question that I would like to get to before we can. So Jake, can I get you to do a couple of minutes, please? And then I'll go to the next question.
Yeah, so just like Mel, this is one of the things that I was kind of like against, like thinking of HS2 as, oh, it's just saving 15 or 25 minutes or whatever between Manchester and London, or Birmingham and London, rather than thinking of it as a sort of capacity release. So some of us, not all of us, some of us would like to see a high-speed rail network across the entire country. So if you're going to Bristol or you're going to Cardiff, you don't have to share rail track with loads of local services. And it means that in those regions, then we can then build new rail lines that serve, there might be loads of different towns in South Wales that don't have a rail station at the moment that would serve Swansea or Cardiff or Newport or wherever. But currently, those lines are like, they're full of like the long distance lines to London or to Birmingham or to wherever. So for me, hey, it's not an either or situation, because we can find the money, we can fund both, and we absolutely need both, because the task at hand of shifting the modal share away from cars and from domestic flights as well is so massive that we absolutely need all of it. We need all our tools in our arsenal to get people out of cars and taking flights, both domestically and also like to mainland Europe, where we can replace that with you know, the Eurostar, for example. So we need both, basically.
Okay, I've had a second question, so I'm going to go to Ellie. I will ask you to unmute. Could you ask your question, but could you do it as succinctly as possible, so that we can get a couple of quick answers and get to the next question, if that's okay? I'm sorry if that sounds
No,
okay.
that's absolutely fine. I'm aware there's concern about impacts on an aquifer, but I don't know the detail. I wondered if any of the panelists were able to shed any light on that and give us an answer to that concern that's being raised. Thank you.
I'm looking immediately for who's going to give an answer, who isn't going to be me. Pete, please, can I go to you?
I'll take it. Yes, this is really one of the areas that it gets quite a lot of people in the Green Party exercised. I did quite a lot of work, when this all came up, kind of looking into this and to see, is there a great deal of substance to this? Should we be worried as Londoners that our drinking water is going to get polluted by what HS2 is doing? And the answer is no. What's happening is that the sort of work that HS2 are doing in the chalk aquifer is actually work that's done all the time. Whenever any sizable building is built anywhere in London, piles have to be sunk through into the aquifer. When any infrastructure like a new road or a new railway line, such as Crossrail we've just had, the Channel Tunnel Rail Link, Docklands Light Railway, it's tunneled through the chalk. It's tunneled through that aquifer. It completely surrounds us. And the engineers who build these tunnels know what they're doing. It's commonplace engineering. They have to be, we have to keep our eye on them. We have to make sure they don't cut corners. We have to make sure they follow best practice. We have to make sure that they fully recognize the particularities of the terrain that they're going through. But I think it's alarmist to get worried about this. This is engineering, and actually, one of the things that if you kind of look what they're doing on HS2 from an engineer's perspective, as I do, I am an engineer. Time and time again, I see the fact that they're actually pushing forward best practice in this area. They're actually doing good things that no one has done before. If you look at the details of what they're doing with tunneling through the Chilterns, for example, these are the world's most advanced tunneling machines. They're completely new. And they're taking considerable care to make sure that it's done sensitively as it passes, through the aquifer, underneath the chalk streams, and through an area of outstanding natural beauty. So I can see that there has been concern. I think I think the time of maximum concern has probably approached. I mean, all of the piles that are going to be drilled through into the lakes in the Colne Valley, for example, have already been drilled. The bridge, the viaduct, is now being built on top of them. So whatever threat there was to the aquifer from doing that has now passed. The tunneling is going ahead. The sensitive time for that is probably in about a year's time, when the tunnels pass underneath the River Chess. Sorry, the River Misbourne, and where it passed very closely. We need to be watching that. But so far, I mean, I think we shouldn't be concerned about it too much.
Fantastic, thank you, Pete. And just so we get as many questions as possible, could we please go to Ryan Hogg next, please, Kate?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. I was just wondering, would the Green Party, the Greens for HS2, be interested in tabling a rail for all proposal similar to the Scottish Greens? So you take into account the effect of HS2 plus the effect on local lines as a cohesive plan, rather than seeing them as two sort of separate, distinct things. Actually treat them in one cohesive plan.
Okay. Adam, would that be best sat with you to come in on, please? And then we'll go to Steve.
Yeah, happy to take that. I mean, although I support Jake's motion, I wasn't the person who proposed it originally, but I support it word for word. I suspect, Ryan, that if we were to phrase things in those terms, then perhaps we might be more successful. I think there's a couple of things that if you're not a transport professional, you could be forgiven about not realising. And I think one of those is about capacity release and, you know, how HS2 even gets more freight on the railways, for example. But also, as I mentioned earlier, how HS2 can really revolutionise local rail by allowing us to build new railways. The Green Party has got some decent rail policies. 26 new local railways being one of them. The fact that we do actually support a north-south high-speed line in principle, I think it's just a matter of joining those up. I think actually the more that HS2 gets built, the less tenable it is to oppose it for the, you know, if you're of reasonable mind, because surely even at this point we're not going to propose that we now rip this strip of land up. Surely the best thing to do with it is to put a railway there. So I think there will come a time where the party will shift to supporting this, and then we absolutely, as Greens for HS2, need to be thinking about being Greens for rail overall and using the HS2 project to really benefit the whole rail network more widely. Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just messaged you, Mel, so I don't really need to add anything to that. I think Adam's covered all the bases, but as I think Adam also said earlier, there is obviously ongoing dialogue with Matt in the transport policy space, because yeah, absolutely right, Ryan. You know, HS2 is one part of an integrated rail strategy, which is something that the country is desperately crying out for and has been probably for 30 years and more. So you're absolutely right. I think in terms of shifting the narrative within the party, you know, our focus has been more around trying to demonstrate the value of the project that is HS2. But as Adam says, you know, it is one part of a wider and more integrated whole. And you know, once the needle starts moving, we can then start to broaden out that discussion. Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we have possibly got time for one more short question. If there's anyone wants to raise their hand. And I warn you now, if I don't, I will allow the panelists a minute each to give a closing comment. Thank you. Elizabeth, would you like, I shall unmute you, but I can't do anything more technical.
Hello, I've done it. It's just, I've been convinced by this. Very good, excellent. How can us ordinary Greens support this? So what can we do to support this motion?
Well, I'm going to jump in to say there is a link already in the chat for how you can join Greens for High Speed 2 that Emma has posted. Jake, would you like to jump in as it's your motion, and then Emma?
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. When you first joined the chat, I had to check that you weren't the former leader of the Canadian Green Party, who was like an MP over there. I was like, oh, is that, have we got a celebrity in it?
I am a celebrity.
So it's coming up at conference the end of this month. It's not that likely to be heard because it's like second to last. So in realistic terms, it's going to be brought back to the spring conference. There might be a couple of changes that people have suggested there should be changes, like the name fully fund HS2. You know, people have said that that's not perhaps the best name for it. So you can join Greens for HS2 if you want. The link is in the chat. What we really need is the people to vote on the prioritization ballot next time, which is the order of conference, how we order conference. So the more votes it gets, the higher up in the agenda it gets, and because we've only got a limited amount of time at conference. If you're attending conference, you know, please come and just support it, vote for it. If you feel confident to speak on the motion, then you know, speak on the motion, or at least the people that you're with at conference. If you're not, I will put a link in the chat to a proxy vote that we were doing. We're doing a proxy vote where if you're not able to attend conference, someone else can vote on your behalf when it's a card vote. A card vote is when it's like a really close vote, then it counts all the card votes like a paper vote. So you can pass on your proxy vote to someone who will then vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you.
Emma, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, hi Elizabeth, great to see you here, and great to hear about sort of people changing their minds. I think one of the kind of really useful things we can do as Greens is sort of talking to other people about this and say, look, you know, I share your values on so many issues, and here's why I support high-speed rail. I think, you know, I've changed a number of people's minds, and I'd like to think that's because I'm sort of super persuasive, but I think it's mostly because like the evidence does add up, and as we know with political communication, you've got to kind of tap into people's values. And I think the sort of, no, this isn't sort of a Tory Johnson, you know, business flashy train that's not going to kind of benefit people. It's like, no, this is think global, act local. This is sort of wanting a kind of a full integrated rail network. And just I just sort of drop HS2 into conversation when I'm at green events, and if people want to kind of pick it up and kind of discuss it, I do. And, you know, talking to at a rewilding event, you know, a quite a high profile direct action climate activist, and she was like, oh, what, HS2? But because like we had this rapport and because we agreed on a whole lot of other issues, we had a really, really good conversation. And she was like, okay, yeah, no, that's interesting. I'll think about that. And so I think, you know, and I think Greens for HS2, you know, long before kind of I joined, you know, had seen success in changing the narrative from you know, the Green Party, you know, prominent people kind of listing HS2 and the bad things that the government were doing now sort of dropped. So I think we've gone from kind of anti to sort of quiet, and I think ready for a shift to sort of talking about it. So I think standing up for rail, you know, anyone in the Eastern region, we're both Cambridge Greens, but, you know, banging the drum loudly for East West Rail, because if that gets cancelled, well, I think we'll very, very, very frustrated and sad. It's impossible to travel west from Cambridge. So yes, as Jake said, you know, 10 comments if you can, get a proxy vote if you can't, vote on prioritization ballots. But I think also with this one, just like talking to other environmentalists about it.
Steve, you have your hand up. I'm going to give you a minute. Thank you.
I don't think I even need a minute, but I think I want to echo what Emma's just said. I think that one of the most vital things that anybody who has felt that their opinion has changed and they've changed their mind as a result of this conversation this evening, just putting that out there and saying, look, I've looked at the evidence, I've had to, you know, I've had my beliefs challenged, and I've seen fit to change them. I can't remember who it was who said, what's the point of having a mind if you're not going to change it? And I think given the age that we live in, where, you know, it's so easy to get trapped in bubbles with social media and political messaging at the moment, people being able to say, I've changed my mind on something because I've been shown the facts or I've been shown a new perspective is immensely powerful. And the more who do that, the better, because time is back to target to win. Effective frequency is a thing. So the more you see it, the more likely that somebody else is to think, oh, well, if they're changing their mind and they're changing their mind and he's changing his mind and she's changing her mind, maybe I should look at it again as well. So just being honest and open. And yeah, there are some idiots on the internet who will troll you mercilessly for it, but there will always be friends for you as well. So yeah, just be proud.
No, fantastic. Well, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to absolutely wrap it up by 9 o'clock, but I would like to thank everyone for coming. We really appreciate your time this evening, and I would really like to thank the panel for coming, particularly Emma for giving that fantastic presentation, which I found really interesting. And we have put the links in the chat for everyone for how to apply for a proxy vote at conference if you're not able to attend, for how to and for how to follow Greens for High Speed 2 on Twitter, and for how to join us. And you would be very welcome. We would be open to talking to you if that's something you'd be interested in. And particularly acknowledging my own area of weakness, I would like to give the biggest thanks to Cade, who has made this whole event happen and who has kept us on track and who has absolutely just been a superstar in terms of tech. So thank you, Cade. I really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much. And everyone have a lovely evening. Take care. Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Mel, for chairing as well.
Thanks, Mel. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Mel.
North
Good night.
Star.